The dojo sat between a nail salon and a shuttered video game store. Its window plastered with a banner that read Apex Fight Academy, where champions are forged. The vinyl was peeling at the corners. Nobody had bothered to fix it in 3 years. Maya Reyes sat in the third row of folding chairs against the mirrored wall, a lukewarm coffee going cold in her hands, watching her daughter get hurt. Sophia was 15, all knees and elbows, and the particular kind of determination that comes from a kid who has decided against all evidence that she can be good at something. She and Oppos. Dee begged for 6 months to join. Maya had said yes because Sophia needed something that was hers, something that didn't and Oppos. T have her mother and Oppos. S fingerprints on it didn't and Oppos. T come from the part of Maya and Oppos. S life that still woke her up at 3 a.m. some nights, heart hammering, hand already reaching for a rifle that wasn't and Oppos. T there. She should have looked harder at the instructor first. That was the thought that kept circling low and constant while she watched. Cole Vance was 31, built like he lived in the gym because he did, with a neck tattoo. He and Oppos. D gotten after his one and only regional title fight and never let anyone forget about. He ran Apex like a fiefdom. 30 kids, mostly from families who wanted their sons and daughters to come home with, and quote, confidence, and quote, paying $200 a month for the privilege of getting used as a heavy bag with a heartbeat. End quote, hands up raise. You and Oppos, refloating. End quote, Cole and Oppos. S voice cracked across the mat like a whip. End quote, you want to actually learn something or you want to keep embarrassing yourself? End quote. Sophia and Oppos. S hands came up. Her jaw was tight, sweat plastering dark hair to her temples. She was trying. She and Oppos. D been trying for 6 months and Maya had watched every session, every single one, because some instinct. She and Oppos. D never fully unlearned Wooden and Oppos. T let her sit at home while her kid was in a room with a man like this. Cole threw a leg kick that had no business being in a beginner drill. It caught Sophia high on the thigh with a sound like a dropped textbook. She staggered, gasped, and in the half-second her guard dropped. Cole was already moving. A short, vicious elbow strike that clipped her above the eyebrow. Sophia went down. Blood welled fast, the way scalp and brow wounds always do, running into her eyebrow and down the side of her face in a thin red line. She curled onto her side, one hand pressed to the cut, and made a sound Maya had heard exactly twice before in her life. Once from a 19-year-old private in a ditch outside Kandahar, and once years later from her own throat, the night she got the phone call about her husband. The sound of someone realizing all at once that the world is not going to be gentle with them. A few parents looked up from their phones. One gasped. Cole didn't and Oppos. T kneel. He stood over Sophia with his chest out, scanning the room like he was waiting for applause. End quote, that and Oppos. S the lesson, end quote. He announced. End quote. Nobody in a real fight cares if you and Oppos. Re a kid. You drop your hands, you pay for it. Get up. It and Oppos. S just a cut. End quote. Maya was already moving. She didn't and Oppos. T run. She didn't and Oppos. T shout. She crossed the mat in a way that made 2 of the teenage students instinctively step back, though none of them could have said why. She knelt beside her daughter, gently peeled Sophia and Oppos' hand away from her face and looked at the cut, 1.5 inches clean-edged, needing stitches but not urgent. Sophia was crying, furious at herself for crying, which only made her cry harder. End quote, you and Oppos, re okay, end quote, Maya said. Her voice was low, even the same voice she and Oppos' D used at a dozen roadside checkpoints and one field hospital where a man had bled out despite everything she did. End quote, look at me. You and Oppos re okay. This ISN and Oppos. T your fault. End quote. End quote. I dropped my guard, end quote, Sophia whispered. End quote. I always drop my guard. End quote. End quote, you and Oppos. Re 15 and he and Oppos. S a grown man who and Oppos. S been fighting for a paycheck for a decade. That and Oppos. S not a guard problem. That and Oppos. S a him problem. End quote. Cole crossed his arms. End quote. No shoes on the mat, ma and Oppos. Am. End quote. Maya didn't and Oppos. T look up. She got a folded bandana from her jacket pocket. She always carried one, an old habit that had outlived its original purpose. Pressed it to Sophia and Oppos' brow and guided her daughter and Oppos' own hand up to hold it there. End quote, we and Oppos. Relieving and quote, Maya said. And quote, she and Appos, s not done for the day, and quote, she is, and quote. Cole and Appos s face flushed. He wasn't an Appos, t used to being spoken past. And quote, you baby her now she folds the second life gets hard. Is that what you want? A kid who quits. And quote. Maya finally looked at him. She didn't an Appos. T raise her voice. She didn't an Appos, t have to. And quote. My daughter didn't and Appos. T quit anything tonight and quote, she said. And quote, you want to talk to me about who folds under pressure, you and I can have that conversation. Just not here. Not in front of her. And quote. Something in the flatness of it, the total absence of heat, made Cole and Appos' mouth twitch an involuntary flicker of uncertainty before his ego papered back over it. He said something about liability waivers as Maya walked Sophia out, but she and Appos' already stopped listening. In the truck in the parking lot, Sophia held gauze to her eyebrow and stared out the windshield. And quote, are you going to make me quit? And quote, she asked. Came out small. Sophia had inherited her father and Appos' stubbornness, the refusal to be the kind of person who walked away from something hard, and Maya both loved and dreaded that about her. And quote, no and quote, Maya said. And quote, you and Appos re not quitting. But you and Appos re not going back there either. There and Appos' a difference between hard and abusive, and what happened in there wasn't an Appos' training. It was a grown man taking his ego out on a kid because nobody and Appos' ever told him no and quote. He and Appos' going to tell everyone I and Appos' am soft. End quote. Let him. End quote. Maya drove them home in silence, got the cut cleaned and butterfly stitched at urgent care, made grilled cheese because it was the only thing Sophia said sounded okay, and sat with her at the kitchen table long after the plate was empty. Later, after Sophia had gone to bed, Maya sat alone in the dark of the living room with a glass of water she wasn't and Appos' drinking and let herself remember, for the first time in a long while, exactly what she used to be. 6 years earlier. The compound was supposed to be empty. Intel said the family had evacuated 2 days prior, that the building was a weapons cache and nothing more, that the team and Appos' job was in and out 30 minutes, no complications. Complications came anyway. They always did. Maya had been a combat medic attached to a ranger element, 5 years into a career that had already taken more from her than she and Appos' expected to give, and then it took Danny. She remembered the exact temperature of the air that night, the particular grit and diesel smell of the compound and Appos' courtyard, the sound Danny Reyes made when the round caught him just below the collarbone, a short, surprised exhale like he and Appos' forgotten how lungs worked. She remembered dropping to her knees beside her husband in the dirt, hands moving on pure muscle memory while her mind screamed at her to feel something, anything later. Not now, not now, not now. She remembered packing the wound. She remembered the medevac bird that came 12 minutes too late. She remembered that 12 minutes, more than anything else in 11 years of service, was the number that lived in her chest like a stone. She and Appos' stayed in another year after that. Long enough to understand that grief and rage, left unexamined, calcify into something that doesn't and Appos' know how to be a person anymore. She and Appos' gotten out because she had a daughter who needed a mother, not a weapon. She and Appos' spent 4 years in therapy at the VA learning how to build a wall between who she had been and who she wanted to be, learning box breathing, learning to sit in rooms without mapping every exit, learning to let a car backfire without her hands going cold and still. She had built that wall carefully, brick by brick. She had told herself, more times than she could count, that the woman who packed a chest wound in a dirt courtyard and the woman who packed school lunches were the same person wearing different clothes, and that the second woman got to be the one who stayed. Sitting in her living room 6 years later, replaying the sound her daughter had made on that mat, Maya felt the first brick come loose. The first conversation. The dojo closed at 9. Maya waited until 9:15 until she and Appos' watched the last minivan pull out of the strip mall lot, before she parked 2 spaces down from Cole and Appos' jacked up Silverado and killed the engine. She sat for a moment, breathed in for 4 counts, held it, breathed out for 4. It was a habit from another life. Cole was at the front counter with two of his senior students, 20-somethings who trained for free in exchange for hero worship and social media clips. They were laughing when the bell over the door announced her. The laughter stopped. And quote, "We and Oppos reclosed," end quote, Cole said, not bothering to hide his annoyance. End quote, "And didn't and Oppos. I already tell your daughter she and Oppos done here?" End quote. End quote, "I and Oppos am not here about enrollment." End quote. Maya stopped 10 feet from the counter. She didn't and Oppos posture. She stood the way she and Oppos learned to stand in rooms where posturing got people killed. Relaxed, weight even, hands visible and unclenched. End quote. "I want you to think carefully about what happened tonight before you decide how this conversation goes." End quote. Cole came around the counter, closing distance the way he always did, using his size the way some men use volume. End quote. "You want to threaten me in my own gym?" End quote. End quote, "I want an apology. Tomorrow. In front of the class. And I want you to change how you run this place. No more using kids to feed your ego." End quote. He laughed. A loud performative sound aimed at his students as much as at her. End quote. "Lady I and Oppos, we got 50 trophies in that case. I and Oppos, we fought in actual cages. You think I and Oppos am scared of a soccer mom?" End quote. End quote. "I and Oppos am not a soccer mom," end quote, Maya said. End quote. "I and Oppos am asking you politely one time to be a better person than you were tonight. This is the only version of this conversation where nobody gets hurt." End quote. Something in the stillness of her voice should have warned him. It didn't, and Oppos. Cole stepped in close enough that she could smell the protein shake on his breath, close enough that his two students shifted uncomfortably, sensing a line being crossed even if they couldn't, and Oppos. Name it. End quote. "Get out of my gym," end quote, he said, end quote, "before I show you what your daughter felt." End quote. Maya looked at him for a long moment. She thought about Sophia and Oppos' face in the truck. She thought about a courtyard in the dark in 12 minutes that never should have happened. She thought about how many walls a person could build before the foundation gave out anyway. End quote. "Okay," end quote, she said quietly and turned to leave. Cole laughed at her back, said something to his students about hysterical parents, and Maya walked out into the cool night air. Not because she was afraid, but because some part of her still believed, right up until that exact moment, that words might be enough. They weren't and Oppos She and Oppos known they wouldn't and Oppos be. She and Oppos needed to try anyway. That was the difference, she told herself, between what she used to be and what she was now. She gave people the chance to choose differently before the choosing stopped being theirs. What happened next? She didn't and Oppos go home. She sat in the truck in the dark lot and watched the lights go off one by one inside Apex, watched Cole and Oppos' Silverado pull away, and understood with total clarity that this wasn't an Oppos over. Not because she was going to make it not over, but because men like Cole didn't and Oppos absorb a no. They filed it away as an injury to be repaid. She was right. Took 4 days. Sophia came home from school on Thursday with her phone held out, hand shaking. End quote, "Mom. Mom, look." End quote. It was a video posted to the dojo and Oppos' page of a student, not Sophia, a different girl 14, being run through the same drill. Cole and Oppos' voice on the audio, cheerful and mocking. "This is what happens when soft parents raise soft kids. At least some of you can take a hit." Underneath in the comments, someone had tagged Sophia and Oppos' account directly. Cole had commented back. "Ask her mom how that conversation went. Guess she folded too. It wasn't an Oppos really about Sophia anymore." Maya understood that immediately. It was a message. Cole had turned her daughter and Oppos' photo into a taunt because he needed everyone, his students, the parents, himself, to believe that the challenge to his authority 4 nights earlier had never really happened, that nothing had touched him, that he remained exactly what he and Oppos always told people he was. Maya sat with the phone in her hand for a long time. Sophia watched her, waiting for an explosion that didn't, and Oppos come. End quote. "Mom, you and Oppos being really calm about this." End quote. End quote. "I know," end quote, Maya said. She was calm because the wall had already come down 2 nights before. In the parking lot. And what stood behind it was an oppose. Rage. Rage was loud. This was quiet, the particular terrible quiet of a decision already made. The second conversation. She went back on a Friday during open sparring hour when the dojo would be fullest. Parents in the folding chairs, teenagers on the mats, Cole holding court in the center of it all like a man who and oppose. Never lost anything in his life. She didn't and oppose. Wait for the bell to stop ringing. She walked to the edge of the mat and stood there until Cole noticed her. Until the room noticed her noticing him. Until the low hum of chatter died into the particular silence that precedes something everyone can feel coming and nobody can name. And quote, "You have got to be kidding me," end quote. Cole said, but there was a flicker underneath the bravado, the same flicker from 4 nights ago, quickly buried. End quote, "You put my daughter and Oppo's photo online to make a joke out of her," end quote, Maya said. Her voice carried, flat and clear, to every folding chair against the mirrored wall. End quote, "You did that because I told you no and you didn't and Oppo's. Like it. I and Oppo's. am going to give you one more chance to be the person you tell these parents you are." End quote. End quote, or what? End quote. Cole spread his arms for the room, playing to his audience the way he always did. End quote. "You gonna hit me, lady? In front of everyone." End quote. End quote, "I don't and oppose. Want to," end quote, Maya said, and it was true. End quote, "I and oppose. Spent a lot of years and a lot of money learning how not to be the kind of person who solves problems this way. I would genuinely rather you just apologize and be better. That option is still on the table." End quote. Cole and Oppo's students were watching him now, not her. That was the part he couldn't and Oppo's stand, an audience witnessing him hesitate. He needed to close this out loudly, publicly, in a way that restored the story he told about himself. He came at her. It wasn't an Oppo's a real attack, not at first, a shove, an attempt to physically move her out of his space, the kind of move that works on people who and Oppo's never had to think about distance and leverage as a matter of survival. Maya caught his wrist, redirected the shove and Oppo's own momentum and put him on the mat with an economy of motion that took less than 2 seconds and looked, to the parents in the folding chairs, like something closer to physics than violence. The room went silent in a different way now. Cole came up fast, humiliated, swinging a wild hook that had all his weight and none of his training behind it. Maya slipped it, stepped inside the arc of his arm, and drove the heel of her palm up under his jaw, not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough that his teeth clicked together and his head snapped back, and every person in that room understood, in the space of one exhale, that they had misjudged who was dangerous. He staggered. She let him have space to recover because she wasn't an Oppo's finished, and she wanted him to understand that the fight wasn't an Oppo's happening to him by accident. It was a choice she was making, one exchange at a time, and she could stop making it whenever she decided to. End quote, "You don't and Oppo's get to hurt kids for content," end quote, Maya said, low enough now that only he could hear it. End quote, "You don't and Oppo's get to hide behind a belt and a trophy case and call it teaching. I came here twice to give you a way out that didn't and Oppo's look like this." End quote. Cole lunged again, desperate now, and Maya ended it. A controlled takedown, an arm pinned at an angle that made his shoulder scream without tearing anything. Held just long enough for the fight to visibly, undeniably leave his body. She let him go. She stood. She didn't and Oppo's gloat, didn't and Oppo's look around for validation, didn't and Oppo's even raise her voice for the room. End quote. "Take the video down," end quote, she said. End quote. "Apologize to my daughter and every kid you and Oppo's hurt in this room. And if you post one more thing about her, I will make sure every parent in this county knows exactly what kind of instructor you are. With or without a fight to prove it," end quote. She walked out. Nobody stopped her. The bell over the door rang, cheerful and absurd, into a silence that would take Cole Vance a long time to live down. Sophia and Oppo's night. Sophia found out from 3 separate group chats before Maya even got home. "Your mom is insane. Did you know your mom could fight like that? Is your mom like special forces or something? OMG. She sat on her bed with her phone buzzing against her palm, feeling something she didn't and Oppo's have a clean word for. Not quite pride. Not quite fear. Something adjacent to both, the specific, disorienting vertigo of realizing a parent contains an entire person you never knew was there. When Maya got home, Sophia was waiting at the kitchen, and quote, I don't and oppose, T think so. It happened in a public place with witnesses and I didn't and oppose, T throw the first move he did twice. But I want to be honest with you. There and oppose. SA version of tonight where things go differently for me. Where I and oppose am the one explaining myself to a judge instead of to you. I knew that going in. I decided it was still the right choice. That and oppose. Not something I want you to think is simple, or that it and oppose. Always the answer. It and oppose not. And quote. Sophia was quiet for a moment. And quote. Why did you go back? You could and oppose. Be just I don't and oppose Tino. Called someone. A lawyer or whatever. And quote. And quote. I thought about that and quote. Maya admitted. And quote. And there and oppose SA version of me, the version I was before I met your dad, before the army, maybe who would and oppose, V done exactly that. But I and oppose. V spent a long time learning that some people only understand consequence, not conversation. I gave him the conversation twice. He used it to hurt you again. I wasn't and oppose, T going to let that stand a third time, and quote. She reached across the table, covered Sophia and oppose, hand with her own. And quote. I need you to hear this part though, what I did tonight in and oppose. T the lesson. The lesson is that you get to say no to people who hurt you loudly with people watching, and you don't and oppose, T have to be sorry for taking up that space. I just happen to know how to make a no very hard to ignore. That and oppose. Not a skill I want you to need. I want you to have other ways first. And quote. And quote, do you miss it? And quote, Sophia asked. And quote, being whatever you were. Before? And quote. It was the question Maya had been dreading since the courtyard, since the 12 minutes, since every night she and oppose. D sat up cataloging exits in rooms that didn't and oppose. T need cataloging. She thought about her husband and oppose. Face about the version of herself that had learned to survive by never being soft, about how much work it had taken to let herself be soft again for Sophia and oppose. Sake. And quote, no and quote, she said and meant it. And quote, I miss your dad. I don't and oppose. T miss what it cost to be that person. Tonight wasn't an oppose. T me wanting to go back. It was me deciding one time that going back was worth it to protect you. Those aren't and oppose. T the same thing, even if they look the same from outside. And quote. Sophia nodded slowly, like she was filing the distinction away for later, the way teenagers do with things they aren't and oppose. T ready to fully understand yet but will need someday. What Cole told himself. In the 6 days between the second confrontation and the night at the shop, Cole Vance did what men like him always do with humiliation. He rebuilt it into something he could survive. He iced his jaw alone in his apartment, scrolling through the comments on the video he refused to take down, watching the ratio of support to mockery slowly, sickeningly invert. He told himself the woman had gotten lucky. One good shot, a fluke, the kind of thing that happens when someone in oppose not paying attention. He told himself his students didn't and oppose. T actually believe what they and oppose. D seen that the two who and oppose. D quit that week had personal reasons that had nothing to do with him, that the parents pulling their kids were reacting to rumor, not reality. He didn't and oppose. T examine even once why a woman who and oppose. D twice offered him an easy way out had needed to put him on the ground to be believed. That was the particular architecture of Cole and oppose. Mind, not stupidity exactly, but a kind of practiced blindness, cultivated over a decade of being the strongest person in every room he walked into. He had built his entire identity on a foundation that required him to never be the one who folds. A single loss, witnessed by his own students, threatened to bring the whole structure down. And so his mind did what threatened structures do. It found a way to blame something else for the crack. He called it PTSD first to his students, then to a local blogger who ran a gossip page for the strip mall business district, then to himself until the word stopped meaning anything except not my fault. He never once let himself sit with the image of Sophia on the mat, the blood, the small helpless sound she and oppose. D made because if he let himself see that clearly, he wouldn't and oppose. T be able to keep believing he was the one who and oppose. D been wronged. By Tuesday, the story in his head had fully calcified. He wasn't an oppose. T a man who and oppose. D hurt a child and gotten confronted for it. He was a decorated instructor. ambushed and humiliated by an unstable woman with a violent past, and someone needed to restore the natural order of things. He called Des that afternoon. Des didn't oppose. T asked many questions. Des rarely did. The retaliation. Cole didn't oppose. T take the video down. He didn't oppose. T apologize. What he did over the following week was worse. He told a version of the story to anyone who oppose. D listen, one where a crazy Petis Devet had assaulted him unprovoked in front of children, where he was the victim of a woman too broken by war to control herself. It worked on some people. It always does. 3 families pulled their kids from Apex. 2 others stayed swayed by Cole and Oppo's narrative muttering about veterans and their tempers in the school parking lot where Maya couldn't and Oppo's T help but overhear. She let it go. She and Oppo's D expected worse, and a few ugly rumors felt almost like getting off easy. She was wrong about that too. It was a Tuesday, close to closing time at Reyes and Amp, Son's Custom Fabrication, the metal shop Maya had inherited from her father-in-law and kept running more out of loyalty than ambition, welding custom brackets and trailer hitches in a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town. Her 2 employees had already left. She was alone, finishing a weld on a livestock trailer frame, when the light from the open bay door dimmed. 3 men. Cole in the middle, a bandage still taped over one eyebrow from the mat, flanked by 2 much larger men she didn't oppose. T recognize, one built like a refrigerator with a shaved head, the other younger, wiry, with a length of chain wrapped loosely around one fist like a bracelet with intentions. Maya set down the welding torch. She didn't oppose. T reached for a weapon. She didn't oppose. T need to look far to find one. The shop floor was full of things that could hurt a person, and she oppose. D spent the last week, if she was honest with herself, half expecting this exact moment. End quote. You humiliated me in front of my whole gym, end quote, Cole said. His voice had the brittle, over-loud quality of a man borrowing courage from the people beside him. End quote, in front of kids. In front of parents. You made me a joke. End quote. End quote. You did that yourself, end quote, Maya said. End quote. I just stopped pretending otherwise, end quote. The big one, Maya would later learn his name was Des, that he ran unsanctioned fights out of a warehouse 2 miles from here, that Cole had called in a favor to bring him, cracked his knuckles with theatrical slowness. End quote. This the one who dropped you, Vance? Man, you and Oppos, softer than I thought. End quote. End quote. Just handle her, end quote. Cole snapped. Maya and Oppos' mind went where it always went in moments like this, not to fear, which she and Oppos' D learned a long time ago was a useless passenger in an emergency, but to geometry. Exits. The open bay door behind them, a side door to the parts room 40 feet to her left. Tools within reach. A pry bar on the workbench, a lug wrench in the toolbox at her hip, a fire extinguisher mounted on the support post. Terrain. Uneven concrete, an oil stain that would be slick underfoot, a hanging chain hoist that could become a weapon or an obstacle depending on who controlled the space around it. She thought distantly of the 12 minutes. Of how much of her life she and Oppos' D spent since then trying to make sure nobody she loved ever needed her to be this version of herself again. And how here she was anyway, because some men only escalate when a woman declines to be afraid of them. End quote. Last chance, end quote. Maya said to all 3 of them, not raising her voice. End quote. Walk out now. Nobody has to get hurt tonight, and I mean that. I Don and Oppos, T want this. End quote. Des laughed and came at her first. He was fast for his size, but size and speed together create a specific kind of vulnerability. Big men rely on their weight doing the work, and Maya had spent a career learning to make an opponent and Oppos' mass work against them instead. She stepped inside his first swing rather than away from it, close enough that his reach became useless, and drove the heel of her hand up into his exposed throat with exactly enough force to interrupt his breathing without ending anything permanently. He staggered back, choking, eyes bulging with sudden animal panic. The wiry one swung the chain in a wide telegraphed arc meant to intimidate as much as connect. Maya ducked under it, felt the wind of it pass over her scalp, and used the same forward momentum to drive her shoulder into his ribs. He went down hard against the workbench, the chain clattering uselessly to the concrete. Des recovered fast, throwing a looping right hand meant to end things. Maya caught his wrist, used his own momentum to turn him, and it was over before Cole had finished backing away toward the bay door. His bravado gone, his face the color of old paper. Maya stood in the sudden quiet, breathing steady, hands only lightly stinging. She looked at Cole. End quote. You brought men with a chain to hurt me in my own shop, end quote, she said. End quote. Over a video and a bruised ego. Do you understand how far past reasonable this has gotten? End quote. End quote. End quote. Cole and Appo's voice cracked. End quote. I wasn't and Appo's thinking. End quote. End quote. You never are. That and Appo's the whole problem. End quote. She stepped closer and for the first time Cole flinched away from her, all the performance finally completely gone. End quote. Here and Appo's what happens now? You and Appo's going to go home. You and Appo's going to write a real apology, not a video, not a caption, an actual letter, to every kid you and Appo's heard at that gym, and you and Appo's going to give it to their parents in person. Then you and Appo's going to sell the equipment, break the lease, and find something else to do with your life that doesn't and Appo's involve hurting people smaller than you to feel big. End quote. End quote. You can and Appo's make me, end quote. End quote. I and Appo's am not making you do anything. End quote. Maya and Appo's voice didn't and Appo's rise. It never needed to. End quote. I and Appo's am telling you what happens if you don and Appo's I have 2 men on my shop floor who came here to hurt me with a weapon on camera, end quote. She nodded toward the security camera mounted above the bay door, its little red light steady and unblinking, end quote. Which means I have every right this time to call the police and let this become exactly the kind of problem you can and Appo's talk your way out of. I haven't and Appo's done that yet. That and Appo's the only mercy you and Appo's getting. End quote. Cole looked at his 2 men on the floor, one still wheezing, the other groaning and clutching his ribs, and understood finally completely that he had brought a war to someone who had actually fought one. He left without another word. Aftermath. Maya called the police herself 20 minutes later, gave a full statement, showed the footage. Des and his partner were charged with assault and unlawful entry with a weapon. Cole, for his role in soliciting it, was named as a co-conspirator. Her lawyer, an old army buddy and Appo's sister who did this kind of work, told her the footage made it about as clean a self-defense case as she and Appo's ever seen, but that clean cases still took months, still meant depositions, still meant Maya sitting in a room recounting the worst 6 seconds of a very long year to men in suits who hadn't and Appo's been there. She did it anyway. She and Appo's survived worse rooms. Apex Fight Academy closed 11 weeks later. Not dramatically. No final showdown, no forced apology in front of a packed dojo. Just a hand-lettered for lease sign taped inside the glass door one Monday morning. The mat's gone, the trophy case empty, the neon sign dark for good. Cole moved out of state, according to the last anyone heard. Maya didn't and Appo's go looking for confirmation. She and Appo's gotten what she needed the moment the sign went up. Sophia switched to a different gym across town, run by a soft-spoken former Olympic alternate named Priya, who spent the first month teaching nothing but how to fall down safely. Sophia liked her immediately. She liked even more that nobody at the new gym ever raised a hand to a student in anger, and that when she asked Priya about it once, Priya had looked almost offended by the question. End quote. That and Appo's not training, end quote, Priya said. End quote. That and Appo's just cruelty with a belt on it. End quote. Sophia had thought about her mother and Appo's face on the mat that first terrible night and nodded and understood something she hadn't and Appo's had words for before. 6 weeks later. Maya sat in the same kitchen a different night, watching Sophia do homework at the same table where they and Appo's once had a conversation neither of them would ever fully finish having. The bandage over Sophia and Appo's eyebrow had long since come off, leaving a thin pale scar that would probably stay with her. A small permanent footnote to a bad night. End quote. Does it still hurt? End quote. Maya asked, nodding at it. End quote. Not really, end quote. Sophia touched it absently. End quote. It and Appo's kind of cool actually. Priya says scars are just proof you survived something. She and Appo's got one on her hand from a bad landing at nationals, end quote. Maya smiled, small and real. End quote. That and oppos. S a healthier way to think about it than I usually manage. End quote. End quote, Mom. End quote. Sophia looked up from her textbook. End quote. Are you okay? Like actually okay. Not the version you tell me so I don and oppos. T worry. End quote. It was a fair question and a hard one, and Maya took her time with it because Sophia deserved better than a reflexive reassurance. End quote. I and oppos. Am getting there. End quote, she said finally. End quote. What happened with Cole with those men? It cracked something open that I and oppos. D spent a long time keeping shut. Some of that was necessary. I don and oppos. T regret protecting you. But I and oppos. V been back at the V the last few weeks talking it through because I don and oppos. T want cracking that door open once to mean it stays open. I want to be the mom who can go still and quiet and boring most days. I don and oppos. T want to be the other thing more than I have to be. End quote. Sophia considered this with the particular seriousness of a 15-year-old encountering her mother as a full, complicated person for the first time. End quote. I and oppos. Am glad you and oppos. Re the boring mom most days. End quote, she said finally. End quote. But I and oppos. Am also kind of glad you and oppos. Re not like only that. End quote. Maya laughed. A real one surprised out of her. End quote. That and oppos s fair. End quote. Outside the night was quiet, the kind of ordinary suburban quiet that Maya had once, in another life, thought she might never get to have again. She reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her daughter and oppos' ear, the way she used to when Sophia was small enough to still let her. End quote. Finish your homework. End quote, she said. End quote. I and oppos. Am making dinner. End quote. Some kinds of strength don and oppos. T announced themselves. They don and oppos. T need trophies or an audience, or a neon sign promising to forge champions. Sometimes they just sit quietly at a kitchen table, keeping watch, ready, but only when they're and oppos. Truly no other way. To become something the world doesn't and oppos. T expect a tired woman with grease under her fingernails to be.